was away, I heard a very interesting conversation as I waited in line for the restroom, the aseos, at the home of Salvador Dali in Cadaqués, Spain. There were two women in line ahead of me, and they were maybe in their 60s, white, and they were speaking English, probably Americans. As I approached, the first thing I heard was one woman explaining to the other that someone she knew wanted to serve in the church, but she couldn't because she did not have the one thing that was necessary, a penis. Now that was interesting. I held myself back from commenting, yes, it's considered necessary, but you aren't supposed to use it. Now, apparently, due to the lack of proper anatomy for service in the church, this woman was no longer involved in the church at all. The other woman commented that she knew someone who went to a service where a woman got up to deliver a sermon and her friend got up and walked out. She did not believe women should be preaching, so she left. The two women then expressed agreement that it's up to each person to decide for themselves how they feel about the role of women in the church. Well, it might be up to the individual to decide what they think and to act accordingly. But as far as the church is concerned, the church must do what is consistent with the ministry and teachings of Jesus. The church is the body of Christ. And there are many stories in our tradition of Jesus defying the social and religious boundary lines of his time that circumscribed the roles, power, and place of women. There are stories of the empowerment of women. There is a gospel attributed to Mary. Part of what made the original Jesus community extraordinary was the role and treatment of women. It was very much against the grain of the Roman and Jewish cultures of the time. While individuals may be free to choose their ideas about the role of women in church and society, the church does not have that freedom. The church must implement what is faithful to the Gospels. Like Jesus, the church must embody the universal love of God, the unconditional love of God. Everyone beloved, no one second class or worse. The church doesn't make up its own standards or mores. It's not bound by its social context or what makes the members feel good. The church is responsible to a higher authority. And this Mother's Day, and hopefully in all that we do as a church, we honor the witness of Jesus in creating egalitarian community. This involves coming to terms with the status and treatment of women, including mothers, in church and society. If you think we are already all over this, here are some recent facts. The wage gap between women and men in this country is 16%. Women make 84 cents for every dollar made by men. And the gap really hasn't changed much in 20 years. That pretty much does it all. Though there are other things that demonstrate the lower status of women in our culture and the world. There's blatant sexism in the church. Recently, was the Southern Baptist Church voted not to ordain women. The Catholic Church, despite the enormous shortage of priests, again, only men are ordained. In Spain, there are priests who serve over 20 parishes. Many towns only have Mass once a month, and not even on a Sunday, if that. because they have a priest shortage. In churches that do ordain women, the women generally serve smaller, lower paying churches. So the church is directly perpetuating the subjugation of women, a situation completely contrary to the witness of Jesus. And this situation is not only harming the church, it is negatively impacting society as a whole and not only women. Now, how many of you have a mother? Alive? No longer alive? Known? Unknown? Who's got a mother? Okay. The way women are treated in society directly affects the lives of each and every child in that society, girls and boys. So all of us here are affected by the status of women. Yes, there's sexism in the church as a whole, which supports the sexism present in society. And this relates directly to the most common word and image used for God in the history of Christianity, Father. People don't think twice about referring to God not only as Father, but with masculine pronouns, he, his. Jesus was male, and with these male words, the church perpetuates the patriarchal systems that oppress, despite the witness of Jesus. Linguistic studies have shown us how language not only expresses our thoughts and experience, but it also forms how we understand our thoughts and experience. Using predominantly male language for God has created a male image associated with the word God. So cultural traits associated with maleness become associated with God. And people who study language tell us that exclusively male imagery for God has stemmed from and translated into a patriarchal society that values men more than women. God is male, male is God, and then there's female. And Adam, other, less than. So there's a direct connection between male references for God and the degraded status of women in society and culture. It's not that it's bad or wrong to associate male traits with God, but it's limiting. We truncate our understanding and our experience of God when we choose mainly to image God in male terms. By using little or no female imagery for God, we have sidelined traits thought of as female that could be associated with God. So we've chosen to limit God, the great mystery beyond our comprehension, beyond male or female, beyond male and female, beyond gender, beyond personification. So this Mother's Day, we're going to explore a little bit the use of feminine imagery and terminology for God. It's not something that's new or that began with the suffrage movement or the women's liberation movement or the Equal Rights Amendment. Mothering imagery for God predates all of that. It actually predates Christianity and Judaism. For us, female imagery for God goes back to the Bible. In the Psalms, there's reference to the many-breasted God. There's reference to God like a mother eagle with her young. There's the reference to God as a mother hen that we heard this morning from Matthew. And there are other references in the Bible that image God in female terms. Are there predominantly male images for God in the Bible? Yes. And that reflects the historical, geographical, and cultural context of the books of the Bible. So that's understandable, but the fact that the Bible emerged from a thoroughly patriarchal context and that there are any feminine images for God and instances of women as leaders in both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament speak to the importance of women and female imagery for the divine. The church should encourage us to expand our experiences and images of God. If we were to associate some of the traits that we think of as female with God, we might get a more comforting, empowering experience of faith. God may become more important, accessible, and meaningful for us. We may feel closer to God. After all, we say we're made in the image of God. We may find a more compassionate, gentler, less violent God in our faith and in ourselves, more nurturing of others, ourselves, and the earth. Incorporating traditionally female traits and language for God may actually make us more Christ-like. Expansive language for God undermines the oppressive power of patriarchy and helps to elevate the status and equality of women. A world in which God is not primarily imaged as male would have made life better for your mother. And you know what that means? Life would have been better for you too. With more choices, more power, more financial resources, more rights, whoever mothered you would have had a better time of it, would have been able to give you more and do more for you. You would have benefited, whether you're male or female or both or neither. Isn't that what we want for our mothers? Don't we want a world where mothers have the ability to provide for their children and to see their children grow up healthy and free to make choices? There may be nothing worse for a mother or a father than to watch a child, their child, suffer. We see this in the story involving Solomon. The woman concerned about the well-being of the child is obviously the mother. And yet, as a world, we continue to torment mothers and fathers by creating conditions where they cannot take care of their children. They cannot give their children food, health care, education, and enrichment, where they cannot keep their child or children safe. Many of the mothers of this country agonize every day simply sending their children to school. Is this the day there'll be a shooting at my child's school? And we must acknowledge how all of our hearts are breaking at the pain caused to the mothers and parents of those suffering in the war between Israel and Gaza. This week, I read about a hospital in Gaza where the staff, many of whom are volunteers from the United States, don't have the equipment and supplies needed to treat the children harmed by the war. And the lives of the children are increasingly at risk due to malnutrition, which complicates the treatment of wounds caused by missiles and bombs, in part by increasing the risk of infection. A story from National Public Radio tells of Oxford professor Dr. Nick Maynard, a surgeon, watching two of his patients girls, age 16 and 18, who had survivable injuries, die because of malnutrition. Another patient, a 7-year-old boy with burns on 80% of his body, suffered because the hospital didn't have enough pain medication to treat him. Can we imagine the torture experienced by the mothers and the parents who cannot feed their children or keep them safe or get them help when they are injured in an attack? It's horrific. And can we imagine the torture of the parents and families and loved ones of those held hostage? I read in the Wall Street Journal about a mother who did not hear anything from her son, who was at the music festival that was bombed, for 201 days. Can you imagine not knowing if your child was alive or dead for 201 days? Then she saw him in a video, and she says she only could recognize him because he was her son. Rachel Goldberg-Pollen explains, we want people to understand that this is our child in a tunnel with one arm looking like a ghost. This is his life while you're brushing your teeth or having your coffee or watching a movie. And there are 131 people just like him. Such suffering is beyond my ability to even imagine. Goldberg-Pollen pleads, I'm just a mom and just a person who doesn't want anybody else getting further hurt and affected. She takes us right back to that reading from Julia Ward Howe at the beginning of the service. The Bible tells of the love of God that's like the love of a mother. We are so beloved. A mother of us all. How do we continue causing pain to one another? Children of one mothering God, all beloved. How do we keep limiting opportunities for women? How do we accept a world in which women cannot provide for their children or keep them safe? To go back to the conversation between the women in line at the bathroom in Spain, yes, the individual can choose to be part of these systems and forces, but the church cannot. The church must stand in solidarity with the mothering love of God and must protect the rights and lives of all mothers and thus of all children. We must stand up and stand out and make the sacrifices that may be necessary, like the mother in the story from Kings. She was willing to give up her claim on her child to see that the child lives and thrives. It's sacrificial love. We may need to give up some of our familiar patterns and assumptions and privilege to co-create a world that supports all mothers and thus all children and families. That is the way of Jesus. That is the way of divine love. A church dedicated to a more mothering God will be a church invested in the well-being of all children, all people, and the earth. May we be that church. Amen.